if as a parent you are letting your child to spend vast amounts of time in solitude, in isolation, in their own bedrooms, or even another part of the house where they are secluded and not interacting with the other wider members of the family or occupants of the house, then you are doing that child a huge disservice, because this is one of the biggest causes of the development and onset of mental problems, depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Loneliness is a big issue amongst the children. Many studies have been done. Even the Joe Commission Society has done a study on loneliness in the UK, and they have found that 10% of children aged between 10 and 17 reported feeling lonely very, very often. And 25% of those with low well-being also reported feeling very lonely on often occasions. And 66% of those children experienced at least one indicator of loneliness some of the time or often of the time. And a lot of these things, yes, they could be associated with poverty, they could be associated with single parent families, or even in parents where both are working. I know many families where both parents are working and the children have to make their own way home. The children have to get into the house on their own, to an empty house. They may have to then prepare their own snacks and then be basically fend for themselves until one or both of the parents return home from work. And this obviously was not the case when the likes of myself were growing up in a different generation, where the mother was the homemaker, the father was the breadwinner, and the mother used to come and pick us up from school, or even the father, if he was not working, used to pick us up from school. And we knew that when we returned back home, the house is always going to be full of people, or at least your mother is going to be there. And we at that time had like bigger families, more siblings, unlike generations of today where maybe there's only one child in the family or a maximum two. But also there's a lot more broken families now as well, where many children are being raised in single parent households. So this also has a huge factor. But even if poverty is an issue, there's also in families which are well-to-do, financially independent, you'll find that they may be doing well. And one of the reasons why they're doing financially well is because both parents are working, they may have high-flying jobs, and hence the children still get neglected to an extent. It's probably a strong word to use, but yes, they will feel neglect if they're coming home to an empty house after school. But what are the issues with this? The issues are that children spending time in their own bedrooms, you heard of the saying that the wolf devours the lone sheep. And we live in a world where, as parallel to our own world, there's a spiritual world as well, where there's other entities which live amongst us, which you cannot see. In Muslim sort of terminology, we call them jinns. In non-Muslim terminology, you can call them alien forces, devilish dark forces. They exist amongst us. And what we find is that they will attack the lonely child who is spending the vast majority of their time in their own bedroom. Maybe they're on the internet. Yes, they may be doing their homework, but also they can easily fall into the satanic traps of looking at things unlawfully on their own because they are unsupervised. They're at that age where they may not necessarily know the difference between what is right, what is wrong. And even if they do know, they don't necessarily have the discipline to be able to deal with those urges. And hence they may end up falling into the trap of doing the wrong things because they are there on their own. And that's where majority of people fall into sinful habits, bad habits, addictions, because they are spending time in solitude and there's nobody there watching over them. They think they are on their own, although we believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty Lord, is watching everyone at all times. But it's very easy to fall into the trap of heedlessness and think that there's nobody is watching. And then on top of that, they could be talking to somebody online, strangers, predators online, who they will then perhaps fall into their trap. And many children are now falling into the traps of online predatory behavior, where they are being blackmailed, where they are being coerced into sending images of themselves to people they've never met before, because they've got themselves into a very compromised position. So that will also lead to a huge amount of mental stress and depression if that happens. And that is why, as parents, we need to create an environment at home where children are spending the vast majority of time under the supervision of the adults, and they are amongst all the other people in the house. Sometimes, yes, we understand everybody may want to do their homework, they may have a table and a chair in their own bedroom, but there must be a way where you can try and facilitate that everybody can sit downstairs on a bigger table and do their homework rather than work in isolation. Because I've coached many families now where the children have got anxiety, they've got depression, they've got low self-esteem, and a lot of the times that has the biggest contributory factor has been spending time in isolation. And what was the original sort of trigger for them to go into isolation was perhaps that low self-esteem. They want to spend time on their own. They don't like interacting with others. But what you're doing then, or what that child is doing, is fueling that low self-esteem, fueling that anxiety by spending more and more time in that isolated manner, in solitude. So my advice to all the parents is to interact with your children on a daily basis. We have many parents who do not interact with their children. This sounds quite bizarre, but that's the case. Father's at work, he may come back late. By the time he comes back, the children are asleep. The mother's busy, she's come back from work as well, then she has to quickly prepare the evening meal and then, do her own chores, and before you know it, it's bedtime, and you've not had that quality time with the children. You have to be constantly in that interaction, even if it doesn't mean you're constantly talking to them. Just being present with the children is a huge reassurance for them. Even that little bit of interaction, that support, that you are there for them, will mean a great thing for these children. So therefore, please do ensure that your children do not spend a huge amount of time in isolation, because that can be a huge issue and problem they are brewing for themselves in the future. And that behavior will carry on into adulthood, where they will have that anxiety. They will probably still want to remain isolated and not interact with others. And this is why more and more people suffer from anxiety, social anxiety, where they are unable to confidently deal with people in public. And these are very much modern day phenomena. Yes, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem existed in the past, but it seems now to have amplified in its sort of quantity, and also amongst the people who have no reason to be suffering from self-esteem, because they have all the needs of their sort of life that they are being met by their parents. In terms of our previous generations may have suffered acute poverty, which we don't have now, in the sense that people, at least majority, are able to go to sleep on a bed with food on the table, and clothes that they can sort of wear, which are presentable. May not have designer clothes, but then not everybody has. But this is why that we have to look at this issue with a great amount of concern and be vigilant, especially for our own children and those who are under our care.